This is LaRouche PAC's Monday evening strategic update. This is Tony Papert speaking to you from Michigan. And in just a moment, we'll be hearing from our speaker, Barbara Boyd, who's become very well known for her depth of insight into the deep state and the structures running the U.S. establishment. We're in a situation where President Trump has just declared for president, the only declared candidate a few weeks ago. And we're at a critical stage toward building, amidst terrible crises and stresses, building a mass movement to ensure that he does become president again in 2025. A mass movement far bigger than the Republican Party. So in this crisis, as Barbara pointed out in an email advertising tonight's talk, the Koch brothers have preemptively struck out to say they're going to try to deny Trump the nomination, working in primaries throughout the country, and even working down to, according to their statement, even working down into local political levels to try to deny President Trump the nomination. So we're in a period of crisis for our country. The alternatives are another Trump administration leading toward a renaissance and industrial recovery of the US. Or on the other side, if that doesn't happen, we're going to be involved in crises far more serious than even what we've seen so far in the Biden administration. So with that, Barbara, why don't you begin?
Sure. A lot of people may wonder why we labeled the email, the Koch brothers jump into the bushes. And, you know, it's really based on a post which just went up on the website, which deals with the nascent movement called the Convention of the States, Convention of the States for short. And I don't know how many people on this call are familiar with it, but it's a plan to rewrite the United States Constitution on the grounds that, you know, there are central flaws in the Constitution which are causing, and it's quite an assertion, the present corruption, which certainly exists in Washington, D.C. It's not that we elect bad people. It's not that we, you know, are suffering from, you know, a police state which has been put into place over a period of some years. It's not that we've allowed our sovereignty to be ceded to something called the World Economic Forum. No, none of that, these people say, is what's causing the problem. What's causing the problem is that we need to amend the Constitution to take power away from the federal government, and the federal government has too much power. That's the argument. And if you go to their website and you really care about the Constitution and you don't know about them, you'll be pretty startled by the lineup of people who, you know, a lot of people, I assume, who are associated with Trump run into on such places as Fox TV, etc. In fact, every single person who's in the Murdoch political lineup is an endorser of a convention of the states to rewrite the Constitution. And my piece, which I posted on the website, deals with the fact that Tucker Carlson, of all people, who's usually much saner than all of that, actually had one of the lead organizers for this on, called Mark Meckler. And he says, based on interviewing Meckler, that even he now has come out for a convention of the states because he doesn't see an alternative to actually turn the nation around. And the things which they offer up is a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. We have to have a balanced budget, term limits, and then a very vaguely defined thing called scope, which they actually talk about taking powers away from the federal government. And it stems from the fact that there's two levels to it. One is a level of an actual nasty political operation directed at the United States, which actually has its most recent history dating to 1947 and the founding of something called the Mount Pelerin Society in Switzerland, naturally, on the shores of Lake Geneva, underneath the mountain which it's named for, called Mount Pelerin. And there gathered a bunch of what I would call philosophical ghouls who had the intention all along of completely undermining the United States, and with it, one of the few things which gives us a claim to, actual exceptionalism in the world, and that is our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence, both of which are profound documents based on considerations by the founders, which involve going all the way back in all of human history and looking at reasons why governments and formations fail in history, looking at why empires failed in history. It wasn't just, that we're looking at the British Empire and our specific grievances with them. It was an overall look by the founders at what makes actual governments work and what doesn't. And as my colleague Bob Ingram has outlined in his recent series of classes on Washington, which are now up as a separate page on the website, and you can actually look at them, the Constitutional Convention was a fight around precisely these issues, precisely the same things which are being waged and talked about now. How much power should the federal government have as opposed to the states? When we had the Articles of Confederation, which I assert is probably what you'd end up with if you went along with this hokey scheme, we couldn't even launch the national defense or conduct the Revolutionary War. We were beggars for money in the world. Now, the central issues which these guys, which are actually the things which are our enemy, which are plaguing us, are actually completely ignored in this prescription, if you will, for how do we get out of corruption. It says nothing about the Federal Reserve. We have ceded our constitutional power to actually control the purse to the Federal Reserve some time back. It says nothing about the fact that if you want a republic, as Benjamin Franklin said, you've got to be able to keep it. And if you look at our overall constitutional structure, what that depends upon is an educated citizenry who's actually engaged in the big issues of government. And clearly, lacking that, you run into big problems with our form of government, which is really the best form of government ever invented by men and women. But more fundamentally, the genesis of this entire movement and the Koch brothers, who are its major funders, comes out of this crazy meeting in 1947 on the shores of Lake Geneva. And there, a guy by the name of von Hayek, who most of you may know as the central philosophical figure, along with Ludwig von Mises, in what is called Libertarianism here in the United States, met with a bunch of other British and Rockefeller Foundation funded economists to actually declare war on the United States on behalf of something called, something equivalent to creating a world government made up of very small states readily controlled by the oligarchy, which would result in a federation. And the line which they came out with is that any government, like the young United States under Hamilton, like the Abraham Lincoln government during the Civil War, where we actually used central economic methods to create the infrastructure and industry by which to fight the Civil War and develop the entire country at the same time. Franklin Roosevelt's World War II mobilization, any government like that, according to them, inevitably gives rise to totalitarianism. And the reason for that is that men and women are sinners, they're totally corrupt, and there's no possibility that they could ever know really anything about reality other than a bestial sense of existence like that which exists with animals. Literally, that is at the core of British neoliberal philosophy. Our founders were not like that at all, didn't believe in any of that. They believed that, there were two fundamental principles at work. One is that we are made in the image of God and we participate in God's creation, and government exists to facilitate the creativity of the individual on a mission to actually realize his or her creativity on behalf of the common good or on behalf of the general welfare. That's what the framers actually thought. They didn't think that men and women were completely evil. They believed that men and women were extremely capable of doing good, and that evil was actually the absence of good. Something you won't find in history books today, because as Bob has emphasized in his classes, the people who are emphasized, the people in the United States at this point are, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, both of whom staged a war against the Constitution during the Washington administration, and staged a war against the very things which the Convention of the States targets at this particular point in time. So what happens is that when the major funders of this entire thing, which I've just laid out, which is an alien attack on the United States, and it's conducted through, has been conducted through various libertarian foundations here, dating way back in my time to things like the Reason Foundation, the Cato Institute, aspects of the Heritage Foundation, the very infrastructure of the establishment Republican Party. When these guys split and declare war, it opens up a tremendous opportunity for the Trump movement to actually conduct a real operation to introduce people to the American system, to introduce people to the types of economic policies which can actually turn this great nation back towards an industrial and scientific renaissance. So I'm excited about the Koch Declaration of War. I think that it provides the basis to re-educate the American population about what is essentially our being as we came about through the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And it's an opportunity once and for all to rid ourselves of the actual pernicious foreign influences which have actually led us astray. And those don't come really in the long term from Russia or China or any of these places. They come from the British Empire. It's the strangest thing, in my view, that we have real patriots running around and saluting Austrian economists as if they have something to tell us, given our experience about running a physical economy and actually creating, which is what we did under our American system, the most powerful economy that ever existed in the world. So I'll leave it at that for my opening. I think it's a tremendous opportunity to actually break with the stinky Republican Party from Washington, but you've got to know who the enemy in that Republican Party actually is. And my contention, after looking at the various apparatuses which exist in the party and have existed really since Reagan in 1980 and have been built up over a long period of time, this is what Donald Trump broke. And this is very much why they hate him so much. And it's very much why a libertarian like Koch, who actually, has one thing which we'd probably agree with. They don't like wars and they don't like the war on energy, but all the rest of it is all about open borders. It's all about, do your own thing. It's all about legalizing drugs. It's all about whatever sexual orientation you want, pick it up and run with it. These are the types of things which are actually corrosive to any ability to maintain the Constitution and to use it to actually turn this great nation around. So that's how I'll end my opening for tonight.